Hello, everyone. Welcome back to The Olive Orchard, a podcast about nothing important, really. I'm just here with stories, advice, and lighthearted ramblings for your background entertainment. I'm Autumn Olive, crochet fashion designer and host of this podcast. First of all, I just wanted to give a little update on the state of this podcast. So, if you listen to the first two episodes, they're okay, but it's not really what I wanted to portray with this podcast, because I just feel like they were really not forced, but I was just so nervous. The thing is that I mentioned that I wanted to start a podcast, and I asked my boyfriend to help me get started and everything, and I think I just jumped into it a little too ambitiously and maybe needed a little bit of time to kind of get more comfortable, and I'm starting to feel more comfortable now. I recorded the first two episodes before I even sat down to edit, so for whatever reason I felt like I needed to get everything out in one take, like couldn't take a breath, couldn't take a drink, until I realized I can literally just edit that stuff out. So I'm feeling confident that episode 3 is going to be more fluid, except I did record episode 3 several weeks ago, but we lost the second half of the footage. Like, my phone just stopped recording for some reason. So I do have the intro, which I'll play for you, and then I'm going to re-record the second part of it, the main discussion part. So it's a nice day today. It's pretty warm outside. I just got back from going to the cafe with a friend that I met. I got a dirty chai iced. That is a chai tea with a shot of espresso. It's not an alcoholic drink. And it was pretty good. I got an extra spicy chai, which is just like extra nutmeg and whatever spices that it has. It's not like hot. Yeah, so, and actually the friend that I met her off of Bumble BFF. If you haven't tried that, I would highly recommend it. I found some great friends that way because I work from home these days and I'm not attending school, so it's nearly impossible to like meet people. So I might do an episode about that in the future, but yeah, that's just a little tip. If you are looking to find some people in your community, check out Bumble. There's a BFF setting, so you can just turn off the dating and look for people platonically, and that's a really good system. Yeah, so I might actually go back and delete episode 1 and episode 2 just because they're so hard to listen to. I don't know what it is about them. Maybe that's just me. Maybe they weren't as rough as I'm seeing them. But yeah, I mean, if you want to listen to those, go listen to them while you can. I might just get rid of them and redo them at some point. But yeah, I'll go ahead and play for you what I was able to salvage from the first recording of episode 3. And then I'll come back here and do the discussion for you. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to The Olive Orchard, a podcast about nothing important, really. I'm just here with stories, advice, and lighthearted ramblings for your background entertainment. I'm Autumn Olive, crochet fashion designer, host of this podcast, and I am an Aquarius, born in winter, not autumn, ironically. Thanks for tuning into my little radio show, and I hope your week is going amazing. So today it is beautifully sunny outside, and I've got my iced espresso here with almond milk and vanilla, and my cats are running around. They're being kind of annoying, so I hope that they don't cause any disturbances. So today I'm actually going to be knitting instead of crocheting, which is another irony because I am going to be discussing crochet today. I want to talk about what it's like as a pattern designer, how I got started with that, and a few other topics relating to it. So yeah, I am knitting. I know I used to get a little bit, not annoyed, but maybe discouraged when I would follow, a crochet artist, and then they started to knit more than 50% of the time, which I don't mind that anymore. But, a few years ago, I've been crocheting for 12, 13 years. So I've spent a lot of time, following crochet accounts and stuff. And, then I would see them start to knit and I'm like, oh man, well, I'm never going to be knitting. So I don't really want to see this. It's like seeing a wrestling match on the cooking channel. But, then I came to see it as just a different form of inspiration. And for the last year or so, I have wanted to learn how to knit, but I've been pretty caught up with my business ventures. So, I was like, I could be much more productive with my business in the time it's going to take me to learn how to knit. So, I never did it. And then in the last couple of weeks, I was like, you know what? I am going to take the time to start knitting really soon. And I didn't know when it would be. I didn't know how soon, or, I didn't know what I needed to buy to start. But I went down to visit my mom and grandma the other day, about a week ago. And, my mom had prepared a late birthday present for me, and I didn't know what was in it. And she didn't know that I was planning to learn how to knit. She knows I crochet, but, she didn't know I was planning to knit. And in the same day, before I opened the present, we went to the thrift store. And, I kind of had in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, next time I, see some knitting needles at the thrift store, I might pick those up just so I can, get a feeling. Because there's circular needles, there's double pointed needles, there's the classic kind of needles. And I just wasn't sure what I needed. So I was like, I might as well start with just one pair from the thrift store or whatever. So I came across a pair of circular needles in the thrift store. I bought them. And then I went home and I unpackaged the gift that my mom had prepared for me. And lo and behold, there was some yarn. I mean, I have a lot of yarn already, but she had picked out some really pretty ones. And some knitting tools, like the needle stoppers, and a book about how to knit. And I was like, this is it. This is the day that I'm going to learn how to knit, because she had everything for me except for needles. And I happened to get the needles from the thrift store in the same day. So I am like, this must be a sign. And so, yeah, that night I sat down with a book. I sat down with a lot of patience and a couple hours to do this. And I, sat there and I followed the book and I learned how to knit. I started knitting a hat and it came out. At first it looked like it was going to be the right size. I didn't follow a pattern or anything, or I don't know my gauge yet. And so after, it looked like it would fit at first, but after I worked it up, it was like too small. So I just unraveled it last night and I'm restarting that. But anyway, yeah. So I'm knitting now, and I'm not going to let it take over my crochet business. I'm just going to try to stay on topic there, and I'm not going to be creating any knitting patterns. I'm just going to use it as like a hobby. Okay, so let's get into this. first off, I'm going to start with your recommendations. So I wanted to recommend something to eat, and that's going to be crab chips. Now, you might be thinking, that sounds disgusting. Well, it's not. They're not made of crabs. It's Utz brand potato chips, seasoned with Old Bay crab seasoning. And I grew up in Virginia, and, that's, Maryland is the state of the crabs and whatever. But growing up in Virginia, and I have visited Maryland, and they have them there too. So I don't know how many southern states have them, but they do not have crab chips in Colorado or California. So for many years, I have had to go without them, and they are literally my favorite chip. They're like, I don't know, it's kind of like a barbecue flavor, but without that sweetness. I like barbecue chips too, but the crab chips are just, oh, they're so good. So if you are lucky enough to live on the East Coast, or if you go to the store and they have those, you need to eat a pack for me. Okay, next, something to watch. bojack Horseman. Now, I mentioned this show in my last episode, but I kind of didn't go over it fully. I just finished it. I had watched it before, but I didn't make it to the last season, so I have just watched it completely, episode back to back, season, all the seasons. And it's just so good. Cartoons in general, as I've said before, they hold this novelty. They have a type of humor that can't be portrayed in film, because you can put these subtle references in the background. You can add, character traits and looks to the characters that you just couldn't do in real life. Like in bojack Horseman, a lot of people were turned off because of the humanoid animals. They're like, oh, this is weird, whatever, I'm not gonna watch this show. But the fact that they're animals is merely just a novelty. Like, they are humans, basically, if you weren't looking at the animation. And I just think it was so clever how the creators, gave the animal characters traits that are based on the actual, species. So like, the birds are paparazzi, and they're always, hanging around outside the window, and the waitresses are cows, and the, officer with the stun gun is always an eel. And Mr. Peanut Butter, who is a dog, he's got beef with the mailman, and, it's just really cute and funny. And, the show itself is so deep and really depressing a lot of the times. But it's also just a great comfort show at the same time. And I just couldn't recommend it more. Okay, next. Something that I am grateful for, and that is snow. I am living in Colorado now, so I am seeing snow a little bit, and I definitely miss that, because I was living in California for the last 5 years, and it was sort of in the valley, and there was not a single day of snow the whole time I was there. The summers were unbearably hot, and the winters were nice, the winters were usually just rainy and not very cold. They rarely went below freezing. So I can say that the winters were beautiful. The summers were not worth it. And, I did quite miss seeing snow sometimes when I was living there. So now that I've been able to see snow again, I'm really happy about it. So next we have a awesome review alert. This is a review for one of my patterns for the Halloween cardigan pattern. It's got 8 different graphics: bats, cats, ghosts, skulls, candy corn, spiders. I think I'm missing one or two. But yeah, that one was such a fun pattern. That was one of my first bestsellers, and it still sells all the time, even though it's now April, it's not stopped selling. So that's really cool. The review says, I love wearing jackets and cardigans, so getting this pattern was a no-brainer. This cardigan pattern is easy to read and also very customizable. I love the cute Halloween graphics that come with the pattern. I can't wait to fill my wardrobe with different gothic designs thanks to this pattern. So thank you. That was from Carrie. Thank you, Carrie. I just love that. I love that people are, wearing spooky cute all year round. I definitely support that. So yeah, that's really fun. Okay, so now we can go ahead and get into the main topic. So, I'm going to be discussing my journey as a crochet pattern designer. It's been a long journey. It's been a fun one. It's been tiring at times. So I did reach out on my Instagram at Autumn Olive Crochet a couple weeks ago to ask for just topics in general for the podcast. And so this consists of a few questions I got about this topic, and I decided to group them together in one episode. So I will be responding to a few of those questions just over the course of this topic. So first off, how do I come up with patterns? So a lot of my patterns consist of, an actual pattern like a sweater pattern or cardigan pattern, and then I come up with multiple graphics. So first I'm just going to talk about how I come up with the actual pattern of the sweater. And so I kind of take inspiration from clothing pieces that I have or have seen. So like that's a sweater, for example. I like sweaters that are a little bit cropped, so like they don't come below the hips, and that the sleeves are kind of cinched in at the end, and that the waistband is cinched in a little bit as well. And I also like sweaters to be wide rather than long. So, I just take some yarn, and I know my gauge, right? So I know that, every so many stitches equals 2 inches or whatever. And so I use that to, kind of estimate, right? So I'm like, okay, so I'm going to want, 30 inches across. And so that should be this many stitches or rows and so on. And, I kind of just draft up a prototype, and I would like to experiment more with different stitches, Mainly I just go with half double crochet on my patterns because it works up quick for me. It's good for adding graphics. It's beginner friendly and so on. So there's only a few of my patterns that feature stitches other than half double crochet, but maybe I would like to experiment with that more in the future, different stitches. But anyway, basically I just get the basic shape down. I usually use acrylic yarn to design with, and then I have it pattern tested. And my patterns, most of them, at first they were all made to measure, just based on the one size that I had made for myself. But I have since started adding graded sizing because that is really important and helpful for a lot of people. And it really doesn't take that much more time to create graded sizing. So if your pattern needs multiples of 6, then you need to figure out, if I add 6 more, will that be a size medium, or will it go up 2 sizes and be a size large? And you really need to work out the math for that, but it only takes a fraction of the time that it did to come up with the math for your size in the first place. So I have learned to start incorporating that math. Even if you do want to do a made to measure, you can still provide some examples or like starting points, suggestions for people to go off of. And so then I have a pattern tested, and I have testers work it out and make sure there's no errors in the typing or the sizing, and I have them make sure that it fits correctly. So here's where I'll restart the episode. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the main discussion topic here. Today I'm going to be discussing my journey as a crochet pattern designer. Over on my Instagram, I asked people, what kind of questions that they would want to hear answered on the podcast. And there were quite a few questions regarding pattern design, so I decided to just put it all into one episode and answer some of those questions here. So I won't be listing like the exact question to answer. It's just kind of like an open discussion that I'm kind of threaded together. So first off is how I come up with patterns. So I don't usually sit down to come up with a pattern. It just kind of like pops into my head, and then from there it's figuring out like the math and the construction to kind of put the image in my head into the physical world. So that usually looks like a sketch, and then, like some options for how is it gonna fit and how is it gonna close and stuff like that. And then I usually will expand on that. I like to make my patterns a little bit versatile, so like my cardigan pattern has options to add buttons or don't add buttons and add pockets, and you can easily mix match the length and the width to kind of do a custom fit, or it also has instructions on how to create the garment in a made to measure fashion. So yeah, sometimes if I see a garment that might strike inspiration, just like a sewn garment, not necessarily a knit or crochet garment, and then, I might take an element from that design and then incorporate it into my own work. The other thing is setting goals. Whenever I have an idea, I always write it down, and I really try to work through my ideas in order, and that way it seems to work out where I don't actually run out of ideas. I always have something to work on, and I'm always coming up with ideas in the meantime. It's definitely a matter of self-control to, not just abandon a work in progress and start a new one. I've done that a lot in the past, but I've been trying to be better about that just because, I like to complete my projects so I can either sell it or at least, get photos of it to use on social media. So I always write down my ideas, and, the longer that they're sitting there, you won't forget about it, but you might even come up with ideas to add on and ways to improve that design, just letting it kind of marinate on your to-do list. So getting your patterns tested is something that's important with pattern design. In my first few patterns, I didn't have them tested. I didn't really think that it needed to get tested or anything like that because they were just made to measure. So I figured, well, why should this get tested? But that was the wrong idea. It's definitely important to have your pattern tested. It benefits you in multiple ways. It gets the word out about the pattern before the release. You get to have multiple photos to kind of document how it fits and how it might look with different yarn types and stuff like that. And then, of course, you can go on worry-free about how your pattern is formatted and written. And testing groups are always so much fun. I always really enjoy getting to know the different testers and stuff, and sometimes they have ambitions to create patterns, and that's a great way to learn how to write patterns. I had never previously joined a testing group, so if I had done that, I might have had a head start on writing patterns, but just having a few patterns tested has taught me a lot that I'm able to incorporate into all future patterns to kind of make things easier and more smooth for the testers. How do I come up with graphics when I have a lot of designs that have, I have the Duck Duck Goose cardigan pattern, which has 25 different birds, and I have the Maple Pines collection, which has 20 different designs within the pattern. So the Duck Duck Goose cardigan pattern, I had actually only planned to include 10 different bird species, but as I was working on it and researching the different birds, I kept on remembering, different species and new species that would be cool to include, and so I ended up just expanding on it. And the same thing with the Mabel sweater. It was originally just going to be 4 different designs, but seeing as Maple Pines wears over 100 different designs in the show, 4 designs just doesn't do justice to that. So one of the major things about coming up with the small graphics is just trying to come up with the best bargain for the customer. With the Duck Duck Goose cardigan, I added a chicken at the last minute because I know that there's plenty of people who have chickens as pets. I added some summer birds because I figured that would be good for people going on vacation. I added some simple birds, some lake birds, and a crow or raven for our dark and gothic friends. My idea was just to add as many birds as I could for diversity and, appealing to a wider audience, so that the pattern can sell year round. I was also asked about my favorite yarn and hooks. As far as hooks, I always use the tapered ones instead of the inline ones because I've just never really had a good experience with inline hooks. I've been crocheting for over 10 years, and the few times that I have tried the inline hooks, they just seem to split my yarn too much. So I always go with the tapered hooks, which includes I think it's called the Hook Light, or whatever, the ones that light up. Those ones are the tapered style. So I do like those, although I had a couple and then they ran out of battery. So I don't use those anymore, but those ones are good too if you want a light up hook, and those ones are the tapered style. And I have actually added clay around the handles of a few different hooks that I own, because the ergonomic feeling is actually really helpful. As far as yarn, I would say that most of my yarn is secondhand. My grandma volunteers at a thrift store, so she's able to get me any yarn that comes in there, and so I'm not really picky about the brand or anything. Half the time I don't even know what brand it is because it doesn't have a label. So a lot of my pieces are color blocked and just sometimes use random yarns. I also shop at thrift stores on my own for yarn. Sometimes people donate yarn to me, and I'm just really not picky about the brand. So, most of the time I end up with acrylic yarn, which is just what I use most of the time. If I do end up buying yarn, like if I need a lot of one color for a sweater or something, I will go with Lion Brand Pound of Love or Karen 1 Pound. I've heard people that don't like Karen 1 Pound, but I don't really have any issue with it. It's usually pretty reliable for me. A lot of people had asked what kind of yarn I used last Halloween when I made glow-in-the-dark pieces, and that was DIY Glow from Lion Brand yarn. As of now, I think they only have the green glow color, but who knows, maybe this Halloween they will come out with other colors. I also like to check thrift stores for other, supplies, spare ribbon and buttons that can be incorporated into pieces. There's always something interesting there, as well as finding sweaters that you can salvage the buttons off of. And I have yet to try salvaging yarn from thrifted sweaters, but I've seen it done, and it seems like a really great way to repurpose something. You can also use fabric scraps and yarn scraps to stuff amigurumi, which is what I do sometimes. So next, I wanted to talk about my decision to allow sales of my patterns. So this is probably a tough decision for most pattern designers. So at first, when I started designing patterns, I didn't know I would start designing patterns when I decided to try to make money from crochet. My plan was to just make crochet garments and sell them and maybe take commissions here and there. But when I started making clothes, it was all freehand, and people began to ask me for patterns. So I decided to try my hand at writing patterns, and I was pretty good at it, and I kept on getting requests for patterns of my designs, and I started to really enjoy coming up with new designs and stuff like that. And I really didn't like the idea of remaking things, because if I were to take commissions for all my designs, then I wouldn't have had the time to keep on making new designs and to keep on writing patterns and keeping enough fresh designs to appease the algorithm gods. So it's always a tough decision. Do you want to allow people to buy your pattern and sell the designs they made or not? And, my thinking was I don't want other people making money off my designs, especially not big companies. But at the same time, I really don't want to be responsible for taking all the commissions of these designs and then, not having time to make what I want. So I figured, well, it can't hurt to try. I figured if sales are allowed from items made from my patterns, it might even help my sales, because then people feel like they can make their money back from the purchase. And then if it increases sales, then that's more, more people making stuff and sharing photos of it. So it's more advertisement for me. And, it's, in a way, everyone's happy. I can make money and my customers can make money and whatever, then it's a happy cycle. So I have been pretty happy with my decision to allow sales from my pattern, because I don't really get all that many commissions anyway, so I don't know, I feel like I made the right decision there. And, with this, I can just kind of relax and focus on making what I want and, not worrying so much about, what happens to my pattern after it sells. I always ask that people do credit me as the designer and that they link back to my pattern. And, I just hope that corporations don't steal from me or whatever. But it's all risk in business. So that's been my decision so far, and it seems to be working out. And the other thing that I did in regards to commissions is I created a referral program. I hadn't seen this done before, so I'm not sure if it has been done before or, probably something similar has been done. But, at some point I might like to have a physical group of creators who can work on these pieces. But for now, it's just online. And so, I've had people who apply to the program, crocheters and creators apply to the program. And once I confirm that they are, skilled enough to be selling finished pieces, then if I get a commission or a request for custom, then I will submit that to my group chat. And if one of the referrals is available to create that piece, we discuss price and everything. And if the customer is fine with that, then, I link the referral to the customer and, they can carry on the transaction. And that system has been pretty good. Like I said, I don't really get that many commissions. At the time when I finally decided to go through and set up the program, I had gotten like a few commissions that week. But after doing that, I didn't get many commissions. So, you win some, you lose some. But since then, at least I know that I have the group there. And, because I always hate to turn down a customer, even if I'm not going to make any money from them. If they come to me and they say, hey, can you make me something? I don't want to just say, oh, no, I can't right now, or whatever. Like, good luck finding someone. At least with this, I can send them with somebody who's trustworthy to make what they are requesting. So something else that was requested to be spoken about is pattern stealers or inspiration versus plagiarism. And this, it shouldn't be a hard concept to grasp, but I think some people are at least, scared to confront it. So it can sometimes be hard to know what is a unique idea versus a mainstream idea. Like that butterfly top, I honestly can't even think of who the original creator was. I should have looked that up, but an individual came up with that idea, and it just kind of got diluted into the internet. Everybody started making those tops. A few people made tutorials. And I would consider that a unique idea, because it's a unique shape of a top. It's a unique concept. Whereas, just a plain halter top can be done in a million ways, and that's not so much a unique idea. Another example would be the Harry Styles cardigan. That one, it had an official pattern released by the designer. So, and the original design is unique because it has the ends on the outside, not weaved in. The squares themselves are knit in different stitches. But that design has also been transformed into crochet versions. It's been, changed around. And, that's not the first patchwork cardigan to ever be made. There's been patchwork cardigans made out of granny squares, patchwork cardigans made out of floral squares, patchwork cardigans made out of simple single crochet squares. So the patchwork cardigan itself is not an original idea, but there's things about each design that makes it unique. Like the Harry Styles cardigan has different textures and the ends on the outside and the collar and whatever. And so my example, I did make a pattern for a patchwork cardigan, but there are a few things that would make mine stand apart from the crowd. And those things are that, first of all, I include a few different vegetables and fruits that can be worked into the granny square. So like the first one I made was a pumpkin patchwork, play on words, and I incorporated a pumpkin into the granny grid. And then, I made a vegetable patchwork cardigan and a strawberry patchwork cardigan from that pattern. And the other thing that I did that really sets it apart is that I included an option for a seamless granny square. So a regular granny square would be worked in the round, and so then you make an individual square, finish it, tie it off, and then attach it to all the other squares to create your panels, which would then be sewn together. But the imitation granny square, as I called it, is actually worked in rows. It's worked with a granny stitch, but when you get to the end of each square, you change it differently so that it ends up creating a patchwork look, but it's actually just worked in rows. So you make each panel in one piece. So instead of doing like 70 individual squares, you just end up making, 5 panels, which makes for a lot less sewing. Okay, another example is like a plain cardigan. I have a plain cardigan pattern. It didn't really start as a plain cardigan pattern. It started as my Halloween cardigan pattern. It was just a simple half double crochet cardigan with buttons or pockets optional, and then I included all the Halloween graphics. But I knew at that moment that I wanted to use the same simple cardigan design to use again for different seasons to add different graphics. Like I knew that I was going to want to do a Christmas variety, and so on. So that's the only reason why I made a plain cardigan pattern. The plain cardigan pattern actually became one of my best sellers on Etsy. It got the little badge, which I wasn't expecting because it's plain and there's a million plain cardigan patterns out there. So, something like a plain cardigan pattern, if you're not including graphics or some other special type of stitch, it's, you really have to come up with something else that's going to set you apart from all the rest. But, for me, I just made mine plain in that the certain amount of stitches would correlate with future graphics that I wanted to include. So, all the Halloween graphics, and then I did Christmas graphics, and then I used the same pattern for the Duck Duck Goose design. So, I took the plain cardigan and made more to it that can be used in the future. Okay, another example, if you're using a certain stitch or like a classic design. So like I came across a stitch several years ago called Cats on a Fence or Kittens in a Row. And it's, a classic. It's so classic that I couldn't even find the original designer of the stitch concept. But, I found it as an Afghan, and I thought, well, this would look pretty good as a cardigan. So I took the Cats in a Row stitch and made it into a cardigan. And I wasn't even sure at the time if that would be acceptable to release a pattern that contains something like that. But, I gave credit to the website where I found the instructions, and, I took an Afghan concept and made it into a cardigan, and it's also a cheaper pattern than all my other patterns. And Alaska Crochet did a similar thing with her Cat's Afghan sweater. It's like the classic Cat's Afghan, but she made it a sweater, and she also made it a cheaper pattern and credits the designer. So something like that, if you take a certain stitch and then make a garment out of it, that's not really plagiarism. If you can credit whoever made the original stitch, that's awesome. So another idea would be copying a theme. So like mushrooms as a theme. That's not original. You can make something with a mushroom on it, and you're not stealing anybody's idea, unless you make, an exact replica of what they do, or if they made a blue shirt with a red mushroom and you do a yellow shirt with a green mushroom in the same spot, that's not really okay. But the idea of mushrooms in general, you're not going to be copying anybody with that, mushrooms, smiley face, flowers, something like that. It's too generic. But when it gets more specific, like if somebody had a design that was mushrooms on toads, for example, that's too unique and specific to try to say that it's your own. If they're making sweaters with mushroom toads, you can't take that idea. So here are some repercussions that can happen when designs get stolen. If designs get stolen by an individual, somebody who is part of the small business crochet community, it sets a poor example for the community. It continues this unclear discussion of inspiration versus plagiarism, because if they took that idea, well, it must be okay to do that, but it's not. it discredits the original artist. Like I said, with that butterfly shirt, I've seen it around so much that I can't even tell you where it originated, which is not good because, then the original artist gets discredited and just kind of lost in the masses of recreations of their piece. It's also just unfair. A lot of work goes into creating a design. It takes a lot of math. It takes a lot of planning. Designers face imposter syndrome. Designers face, the risk of theft every time they post something new. And then it's kind of like once something gets stolen, there's not really anything that can be done. If somebody's making money off of your design, you can't really do anything. Like, we don't have an Instagram jury. We don't have a Pinterest security guard. The only thing that can really be done is to try to request that they take down your design, take down the listings from their shop. You can settle it in court if you have the kind of money, but most people don't. It's even worse when companies steal from small businesses. It's unethical. They're already paying people such low wages, and they can't even afford to pay trained designers and have a unique design team. They're literally stealing from small businesses because they know that small businesses don't have the resources to fight back on something like that. It's unlawful because of that. They take no risk in doing that besides, people coming at them on Instagram and social media and stuff, which they really don't care about that. They're too big. They're not going to really lose sales unless there's a major strike. And it's really just disappointing, like such a big company being so selfish that they can't come up with their own designs and they're stealing from small businesses. It's confusing for the consumer because the consumer doesn't understand the difference between, fair wages on handmade items. They're, when you buy from an individual, like me, for example, I did the whole everything. I came up with the design. I executed the design. I created the garment, which takes many hours. I pay for shipping. I pay for gas to ship. I pay, listing fees and take the time to write the description and all of this. And, these companies just breeze through these steps. And they don't pay people enough. They pay unfair, unethical wages, and then they sell these garments for $10, $20 when they took 10, 20 hours to make. And so you can imagine that the people making them are making next to nothing, because they're putting in all these hours and physical labor for that. Okay, so that's all I have for this episode. Even though I wanted this one to be the best yet, it was still messy because I had to cut the video from this one and the other one and mix them together. And I'm still having like technical issues where when I merge the audio with the video, it doesn't sync up. Like it syncs up, but then it slowly goes out of sync. I think it's like the video is just ever so slightly slower. So I'm not sure how to fix that. Lately I've just been doing it manually. Speeding up some parts of the video and not, but anyway, a podcast was quite a leap So I'm still just doing my best. Hopefully next episode will go a little bit smoother. I want to talk about just running an online business as a whole, whether it's, crochet or anything else, digital pieces, physical pieces, whatever. Well, thank you for listening. The cover art you see is by me, drawn on Procreate. You can check out my YouTube for video episodes of this podcast and free crochet tutorials as well. Visit autumnolive.com to shop crochet pieces, patterns, and free patterns as well. Follow my Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, Etsy, and Ribbler, all at Autumn Olive Crochet. And you can find this podcast on Spotify and Google Podcasts, hopefully soon on Apple Podcasts. And you can email in regards to this podcast at theoliveorchardpodcast@gmail.com. If you're still listening, I'd like to provide a life hack for you, and that is keeping a bullet journal. I've actually had a bullet journal for 5 years. I replace it at every new year. And if you look it up on Instagram or Pinterest, you will see like really beautiful calligraphy and watercolor and washi tape and stickers and stuff. And I've tried to decorate my bullet journals like that, and I'm always just disappointed in the results because I don't have much practice with like paper crafts and stuff. But usually I just go with like a simple spread on the bullet journal, and I allot spaces for only what I need. And needs are ever changing. So 1 month I might want a section for things to buy on Amazon, but the next month I might not need that section or whatever. So it's a really great way to tailor what you need and kind of organize your thoughts. And then, if there's anything that you don't finish, then you just put an arrow through it and finish it on the next day or the next week or the next month or whatever. And I've found this to be really helpful in, breaking down every little thing that I need to do for my business, like record a video or podcast and then edit it and then upload it, or, different steps in pattern writing process or testing process. So I would really recommend a bullet journal, and you can just use any cheap journal. I use the grid paper kind, and I get it from Michael's for like $6 or something, and I just get one per year. And you don't have to decorate it all fancy or anything. You can just use simple pen and pencil, and it's just a really great way to organize your life. So hopefully that's helpful to you, and thank you so much for listening.